Hi guys, a very happy Bealtaine to you all. I hope you're having a really nice day, and I hope you enjoy your celebrations and your rituals and everything that you're going to be doing, whether yesterday or today or in the days to come. It's raining at the moment, but I just wanted to show you, if I can, the sky is starting to clear in the north, so it looks like we're going to have multiple weather today, which is always nice. I like to have a bit of rain, but I also absolutely love the sunshine, so I'm excited to see that we might get a bit of sun in a few hours. So the vlog on the Sabbath is going to be a little bit different this time around. I feel like the format I initially came up with, which was, I wasn't even thinking of making it into a series when I started it. I just did a vlog on the winter solstice initially, and the reason I did that was because I knew that I had various things that I was going to be doing over the course of 2 days, and I thought it would be nice to kind of share those things with you. But I've actually noticed that the later it gets in the year, or the more we move towards the summer, the fewer and fewer kind of traditions I actually have apart from doing ritual. And I think, I'm not exactly sure why this is. I think it might just be that maybe the winter solstice is one of the only ones that I really have a proper tradition where I have certain things that I do, you know, that I get up at dawn on the morning, or before dawn, the morning of the actual solstice, and go out and greet the sun. And then on Imbolc, of course, I make St. Bridget's crosses, so that's something that I do. Then and then obviously Samhain is my birthday, so that's just a weird one. I just always have various things that I do that day, but I feel like for all the other ones, there just isn't anything in particular that I do during the day or the day before or anything like that. And yeah, like I say, making these videos has made me notice that, and I think maybe I'd like to change that, but I haven't got around to changing it for this year. I had considered getting up at dawn today. Today is the 1st of May. But I just honestly didn't feel like getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning. So I just did my usual ritual, which is the usual kind of ritual setup that I do. I have a certain set of things that I go through now to set up sacred space. And then once I'm in sacred space, I sort of did a kind of path working. It was quite loose this time around. The path working that I did for the spring equinox was a little bit more planned in advance. I had an idea of a deity that I wanted to work with. I had an idea of what I wanted to sort of do and feel, and even had an idea of what I was going to experience, part of what I was going to experience on that path working. So it was all quite specific. The idea had sort of come to me after reading a Mary Oliver poem. And part of the path working involved reading that poem. This time it wasn't so planned, it wasn't so involved. I found myself again finding this Sabbath kind of creeping up on me. And it was only maybe a couple of days ago that it suddenly struck me what I wanted to focus on for this Sabbath. And that is the idea of well, desire was a word that came up for me, and also thinking about sexuality, my sexual sovereignty, and that kind of thing. It's obviously not something I want to go into a huge amount here on the channel, or indeed in talking to anybody, because one of the things about sexuality is that it's intensely personal, obviously. It's something that people generally don't talk to each other about a huge amount unless they're in a sexual relationship with that person. And it's just generally considered to be a bit of an awkward subject, a bit of a taboo topic. But also I think there's something about sexuality and sexual energy that is, it's very sort of powerful, and it has a similar sort of vibe to it, I think, as, you know, the way a lot of cultures have this thing about having your real name, or a name that you don't share with anybody else. And certainly some pagan traditions also have that tendency where the practitioners will adopt a sort of I can't even think of what they call it now, but a particular name that is their magical name, I suppose, is what people call it. And there are various different permutations of that kind of idea. There's something about sexuality that reminds me of that feeling. It's this kind of private but very intense and important part of you that not very many people have access to, or yeah, that you don't necessarily share with a lot of people. Or even if you're sharing it with a lot of people, you may be sharing it in different ways. You may not actually be opening yourself up in the same way that you would with someone that you're actually in a relationship with. Anyway, that's a whole other story. So I'm not going to go into that too much, obviously, but I have been thinking about sexuality, particularly in relation to the divine, sexual energy as a feeling of connectivity, connection to the all, rather than focusing on sexuality as something that you feel for somebody else. I've been focusing on the idea of sexuality just solely as something that you experience yourself, as part of yourself, that has nothing to do with anybody else, and that is just an experience, an energy and a power that you have, that can be just something intensely personal and private, and yeah, to do with your connection to the divine and to the all. And yeah, it's an extremely important part of your energetic makeup and your personality and all that kind of stuff. And Bealtaine is just kind of the perfect time to be thinking about that kind of stuff. It is pretty much the point in the wheel of the year that people most often associate with sex and fertility and that kind of thing. So the two things have kind of, it's kind of a coincidence in a way that this has come up for me, because I kind of started thinking about sexuality and that kind of thing in a separate thing to Bealtaine. I wasn't initially thinking about Bealtaine, but then yeah, when I realised that that was something that I was thinking about, that was coming up for me, I thought, well, this is the perfect time, synchronicity, perfect time to address this a little bit. Yeah. Oh, before I go any further, I will mention I call it Bealtaine. You might have noticed, and a lot of you will be saying, what? Why aren't you calling it Beltane? I have decided to start spelling it Beltane on my blog and video descriptions and stuff, just to minimise confusion, because Beltane is by far the most common name that people use and the most common spelling. Bealtaine is basically the Gaelic Irish variety of the name. Can't remember now exactly how it used to be spelled in Old Irish. That's something I should know off the top of my head, but I don't. But it would have been pronounced something similar to Bealtaine, Beltane maybe. I'm not sure, but in modern Irish it's Bealtaine, and Bealtaine is actually the name that we have for the month of May. So it just makes sense for me to, you know, I am an Irish speaker, I am bilingual, and it just makes sense for me to call it Bealtaine rather than Beltane. But for the sake of clarity, I tend to use the spelling Beltane online, but please forgive me if I don't actually use the word Beltane, because it's quite alien to me. It's always been Bealtaine for me, and it always will be. Yeah, so there's not an awful lot I can really say about my ritual, because the path working was just so unplanned, and it just was something obviously that I'm not going to talk about to anyone, let alone here online. But I did sort of, excuse me, that's my phone. I did sort of realise a few things that I hadn't realised and that kind of thing, which is always nice and happens a lot, generally during Sabbaths more than full and dark moons. But any time that I do ritual, I will usually learn things from the figures that I meet in the other world and stuff like that. So yeah, so the themes for me for Bealtaine, last year it was more about action. Desire has come into it quite a lot for me as well, but primarily last year it was more of a sort of desire for things to come into my life. The word desire, that the theme of desire, is something that I picked up from, you've guessed it, Pagayan cosmology. Glenys Livingstone focuses on desire as her key word kind of for Bealtaine, and she looks at it as a sort of desire as being the underlying energy of cosmos, that it is desire that spurs the act of creation, you know, the blossoming of life and everything. It is this desire to be, a desire for, you know, that as animals we have a desire for air and food and light, and we need all these things. And for her it's all about this desire for life, basically, desire for life and light. Coming into the light part of the year. But I hadn't really made that connection between desire and sexuality, which is kind of strange, because I think it's because I've never been comfortable particularly comfortable with the Wiccan association with Bealtaine with sort of heterosexual sex. I've talked about that before in my video about the masculine and the feminine in paganism. I can't exactly remember what the title of that video was, but I'll link it below. I did talk about that briefly, and I mentioned that for me, the heterosexual sex thing and in general the male-female division of divinity has never worked for me properly. I mean, I did use it, the male-female thing, for a good while I was sort of finding my feet, when I was initially thinking of myself as, I basically had a pretty Wiccan practice for some years, and when I was coming back to my spirituality and finding my feet with it, I did utilise a sort of male-female imagery, and I do still to some extent, because obviously when I'm working with personified deity, they are going to be male or female. Occasionally they will be both, but you know, generally speaking, as humans, generally speaking, we are male, female. That is how it's going to work with personified deity. By definition. But yeah, it's never been something that has sat right with me, so I think I had a bit of a uncomfortable reaction to the idea of Bealtaine being all about sort of sex and fertility and the meeting of the god and the goddess and all that kind of thing. It was almost like Valentine's Day all over again, do you know what I mean? It sort of just made me uncomfortable, rubbed me up the wrong way. I didn't necessarily want to be reminded that I was single, and even if I wasn't single, I didn't necessarily just want to have that association with it in general. It didn't have anything much to do for me with the time of year, or indeed with divinity or my spiritual practice. But yeah, I'm really liking this feeling of sort of sexual sovereignty and taking back the power of my sexuality and acknowledging that my sexual energy doesn't have to have anything to do with anybody else. It can just be something that I experience, that I acknowledge in myself as just a part of myself. And not something that has to be always outward and has to be dependent on, you know, other people. There's something, I think a lot of the time we feel disempowered by our sexual energy, particularly if we are lusting after somebody we can't have, if we aren't in a relationship and we feel like we need to be, or even within a relationship. A lot of power dynamics in relationships can be can kind of hang on sexual intimacy, and that's just not a particularly pleasant way to go about a relationship either. And you know, this will obviously not be the case for everybody, but I think in any relationship there will be an element of that to some degree. And yeah, I think it's just important to sort of reclaim that and to feel comfortable with the feeling of desire, of sexual desire, in and of itself. Yeah, so for the actual day that's in it, I'm not doing anything in particularly special today. Perhaps more than any of the recent Sabbaths. It's weird because I get very excited about April and May. It's always a time of high energy for me and a lot of external change. I'm usually getting a lot of projects underway and stuff like that. And maybe I just feel a little bit overwhelmed by that and a little bit stressed out by that. Because I'm not taking the day off work today. Well, I don't work on Thursdays. I work on Heart Story and related projects on Thursdays and Fridays. But I didn't necessarily feel like setting up any social activities today or, you know, doing anything in particular to mark the day. And I couldn't exactly tell you why. I will be going out to my parents' house this afternoon and having dinner with them. And that will probably be about the extent of it. It's just started raining again. I always love rain during ritual, actually. I think having noticed now that more and more of my videos on the Sabbaths are becoming just sort of a one-shoot spiel about what I did in ritual and what it means to be in that and that kind of stuff. I think I would like to start having a more sort of physical celebration of the Sabbaths. I definitely like just having straightforward rituals for the Sabbaths and on occasion, say for the full moon and the dark moon and stuff like that, where I have a chance to do path working, to talk to my matron deity and that kind of stuff. But I have for quite a while now been feeling a wish for more kind of physical rituals, you know, like my one I have for the winter solstice, where I get up for dawn and go and watch the sunrise, and then generally watch the Newgrange footage as well, and stuff like that. There's a blog that I read, actually. I'll link that below as well. It's called Heart Shaped Hands. written by a woman called Mo, and it's absolutely wonderful. She has a very small child, and she is currently full-time mothering, and her practice is sort of by necessity, but also just, it seems to be quite organically, very practical and hands-on. She has this very kind of hands-on way of going about things. And, you know, her full moon celebrations will consist of baking something appropriate, drinking milk, sitting, going outside and looking at the full moon, that kind of thing, rather than doing actual rituals. In fact, I don't think she really does any ritual at the moment at all. She involves her husband and her son in her rituals and her practices, because a lot of the time they're not specifically spiritual, you know what I mean? They can involve planting things, doing things in the garden, going for a walk in the forest, that kind of thing. And that's the sort of stuff that I would love to do. I feel a little bit constrained by the fact that I can't drive and I don't have a car. So I can't just kind of say to myself, right, I'm going to go for a walk by the sea. Well, I can, but it's more difficult for me to orchestrate that. Or, you know, go for a walk in the forest. I would need to have somebody to drive me there, and, you know, that kind of thing. My boyfriend does drive, but he doesn't have a car. So, yeah, so I will be thinking about that more. In fact, just what I said off the top of my head there, going for a walk by the sea, that actually sounds like a really lovely thing. And maybe even I don't need to have a different ritual for every Sabbath. Maybe it can just be the same one, like going for a walk somewhere in nature on the actual day. So maybe I'll do that later, even if it's raining. Maybe I will do that. Yeah. So yeah, few more words about the ritual I did last night and how I set it up. I like to start my ritual at this time of year at sunset, because it's a good time. In the winter, obviously sunset in Ireland is like about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but coming towards the summer, sunset is was about 9 o'clock last night, 10 to 9, which is perfect time for me to start my ritual. It's kind of the time that I like to. It's like before I get tired, but it's giving me enough time to sort of do everything I need to do, and you know. So that's kind of in line with Irish traditions, Celtic traditions of the day starting at sunset, and that has a lot of power for me. It always has. There's something very powerful for me about watching the last of the spring light go. And as the darkness takes hold, then we're stepping into the new time. I suppose that the new time, and in this instance summer, doesn't really start until sunrise the next day for me, but that darkness, the night in between, is a wonderful liminal time when it's really a great time to do ritual and acknowledge the stepping into the new time, and acknowledge that period of transition. So that's why I tend to do ritual the night before the day rather than on the day itself, because I'm all about that liminality. In general, I'm big on liminality. It's a really powerful concept for me, and I like to embrace that as much as possible. Unfortunately, sunset isn't always the time when I can do my rituals, and indeed by midsummer I'll have to be doing my ritual quite late in order to align it with the sunset. Well, not really that late, but I do tend to like to allow myself to have a bit of time to sort of cool off after ritual and wind down before bed. So but to be honest, come midsummer I tend to sleep a little bit less anyway, because there's so much light. It doesn't really get dark until probably half 11 or midnight, if it really gets dark at all. There's usually, you can generally see some light on the horizon, on the north horizon, all the way through the night, even in Dublin at midsummer, and then it starts getting bright again, starts lightening up probably even as early as 3:30. So we have very little darkness at midsummer. But yeah, that's one thing I do like about the summertime, doing ritual during the summertime. It took me a while to get used to doing ritual while there was still some light. I used to have to leave it even later to do ritual, because I used to feel like I had to do ritual in the dark, but I actually really enjoy that now, starting out with a little bit of light coming into the room. And my room is northeast facing anyway, so there's no direct sunlight coming in while the sun is setting, so that works out very well. So yeah, I think I've probably rambled on long enough. It's probably, that kind of stuff is probably stuff I should have mentioned at the beginning, and I probably should have mentioned as well that Beltane is the beginning of summer for me. That's traditional here in Ireland. I have actually recorded a video introduction to the Wheel of the Year I'm not sure when I'm going to be posting it. It'll probably be a week or two. I might actually schedule it I might actually post it. I'm going to go to Kerry in a couple of weeks, so I might actually post it around then, because I won't be making videos for a week around then. But yeah, I talk a bit more then about how I see the wheel of the year and things like that, and when the seasons change for me and stuff like that, and why that is. Yeah, so I think that's probably enough rambling for now. Yeah, let me know what you do for Bealtaine, what your ritual consists of. Do you have any like physical practices that you do? Do you go out and do something in particular on the day, apart from, you know, kind of literal spiritual practices? Like, do you go out for walks? Do you go out to somewhere in particular? Do you meet family and friends? Yeah, I'm really curious. I do sometimes consider hosting a dinner for friends and stuff like that on the day of the Sabbath, but honestly, it's just the organisation aspect of it. And, you know, I live in a really small apartment and I can't really fit that many people around my dinner table anyway. I think 4 would be about the amount I could manage. So yeah, I'll leave it there for now, and I'll talk to you guys soon. I hope you all have had a really wonderful Bealtaine. I know it's a particularly special time for a lot of you, even though I've in a way sort of grumbled on about how it's not special enough for me. I know it's a time that an awful lot of you really love, and I absolutely do. I always feel amazingly energized, and things really start to click into place for me at this time. So I'm really excited for May and for the coming months, for the whole summer. I think it's going to be a great summer. Okay, talk to you again soon, guys. Take care.